So, good afternoon, everyone. I see we have reached very far in the agenda, and it will be a tough task to have you with me throughout the presentation. But when talking about Kosovo, it's not interesting only in the political aspect. Trust me, it is a very interesting case also in the energy development. And without further ado, I will just present myself. I'm Learta Hollaj. I come from the Institute for Development Policy. That's a think tank organization based in Pristina. But it's very important to mention that we are a member of a bigger family of organizations. We're known as the Consortium of Civil Society Organizations for Sustainable Development. Maybe shortly you have heard about it, it's COSID, but other than that, we are rather the other side of the coin while talking about energy developments in the country. So we have government on one side, which is rather preferring to continue our exclusive dependence on coal, and then we have COSID on the other side, who are insisting to promote sustainable energy developments in the country. And with that, it is, I guess, fair to go back and just reflect a little bit on what is actually happening in Kosovo, and why are we doing what are we doing. Maybe you know, maybe not, but it is very interesting to point out that we are the 5th largest proven reserve of lignite in the world. And moreover, we are the 3rd largest proven reserve of lignite in Europe after Germany and Poland. With that said, it means that this mineral has been of outstanding importance for the country overall and for the economic development up to now. But the question remains, what about the future of coal and whether this will be our future indeed? Yes, we have huge reserves of coal. They are estimated at 14.7 billion of tons. But the problem with all of that is that the lignite that we have has very low energy containment. Approximately, it is estimated at around 7.8 megajoule per kilogram of lignite. But what is even more problematic is the fact that Kosovo releases approximately 5.8 million of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere annually. Now, our policymakers would say, that's nothing compared to the rest of the region or the rest of the world. But when we talk about, and that's not something that I will develop further, but trust me, we are paying this in terms of health costs and the environmental costs that we are encountering on a daily basis. I also wanted to point this out. Indeed, there is a lot of problem when talking about pollution, but when we talk about particulate matters 2.5 and what is actually happening with the region, you can see that Kosovo is actually taking the lead, with Kosovo A and Kosovo B being the 1st and the 3rd in line. So actually the problem with the coal and the reliance on coal-based production is more problematic than it actually seems at first glance. Now, going a little bit deeper into what is happening with the energy sector in Kosovo, we have 2 major power plants. We have the Kosovo A power plant, which was built in 1962, outdated already, and then the other one, which is Kosovo B, we love letters A and B, and that is the one that is built in 1983. As you can see, the first one is generating with almost half of its capacity, and the second one stands a little bit better. But the thing is that after the war, there have been major investments in the energy sector, indeed inefficient and not resulting in major improvements in infrastructure or the performance of the overall sector. So yes, we are a net importer. Despite the domestic production, we continue to import from abroad. Yet the developments and everything that's been happening in this sector that mainly relating to the fact that even today we face energy outages, that means a lot of shortcuts, cut downs around the capital and beyond, that has been a major impediment for the development of the country. And moreover, almost 50% of the businesses in a recent survey have indicated that actually because of these problems with the energy sector, we have a major impediment in terms of economic development overall. Now, what is even more important to state is the fact that we have a very poor energy mix. Now, you were talking about the fact that there is a lot of prosperity and progress in terms of integrating renewables into your grids and the energy mix. In our case, we have 97% of the energy that is produced from that famous lignite, and the rest is hydro. So if you want to be a champion in terms of being reliant on fossil fuels, then it is certainly Kosovo, the country that leads in the region and also beyond. What is more problematic is that when you take the energy strategy, and it's actually a document that has been modified just recently and will be brought to the Assembly just next week, you see that the government is still planning to continue reliance on coal. So we are planning to bring yet another power plant that will be Kosovo. It has been known as Kosovo C, but then they have decided to modify the name and bring something new. So it's the new Kosovo power plant, which further indicates that yes, we will be relying even for at least 40 years in the future almost exclusively on coal. And that is a reason why we have this group of organizations that are saying, well, stop, maybe there's a moment that we should reflect and see if there are some alternatives. But this is just an indication to tell you what I stated earlier, to showcase that actually what is the consumption level, which is indicated with the blue line, and then what is the production level with the red line, and just an indication that yes, we are just demonstrating what I stated previously, a net importer overall, but the second one is forecasting in terms of demand until 2025, and we don't have any planning beyond that, unfortunately. These would be the trends with different growth scenarios, but either way, we can see that with a less optimistic one, we don't have a major change. The red one is considered actually the one that will be the most realistic scenario. But yes, with all this being said, and with all these numbers taken into consideration, we want to know if there are actually some alternatives and other ways around for our future and energy sustainability. Unfortunately, I don't have the people who have been working on a study, which I'm going to talk a little bit in the minutes to come, is the sustainable electricity options for Kosovo. And the study was published in late 2014. And it was led by Mr. Daniel Kamen, so indeed he is a friend of the countries of the region, with some of the people who come from these organizations from COSID. Now, what was the idea of the study was, as I said, to see whether we can somehow phase out from coal and see how to integrate renewables. So the study models the cost of building new generation capacity within the power sector in Kosovo. So the scenarios are almost heavily reliant on the idea to integrate renewables, with that being said, solar, wind, and hydropower. And each scenario which has incorporated renewables, at least based on the findings of the study, has showcased that actually we can meet the domestic demands, and maybe to some extent we could also be a very valuable player in the regional market, because there could be cases we could also consider exporting. This is just a reflection on everything what is happening in the country. Unfortunately, we don't have any genuine studies in terms of telling us what would be the availability of different resources. And with that, the people who have worked on the study had to rely on approximations on building and collecting data from different studies and putting them together. So this is just the assumptions to tell you that what have been the numbers that have been considered in this study. So yes, approximately 10 to 12 billion tons of coal reserves that can be usable for the future, with solar approximations based on the region, because we don't have specific studies to tell us what is exactly the potential of solar in the country. So that would be if the region has a capacity of that ranges from 1,550 kilowatts hour per meter square over a year, then we would somehow derive an average that would apply to Kosovo. And I wouldn't really go into further specific details into this, because it really tends to be technical. And we had some people telling and saying that, yes, we have a lot of people who love technicalities and really do it in a very good way, but then we have the people, as the rest of us, who are actually relying on policy analysis, advocacy, lobbying, and using those numbers that you are working on to actually work with these policymakers in our countries, because they have somehow stuck at the level of discussion where one of the speakers were saying what were developments in the 80s maybe of Denmark, or even before that. So we are stuck there. And actually what we can see from the government planning, not only in Kosovo but also around, is that this tendency to change the mindset is rather slow. So as I said, we had, the people who have conducted the study had to rely on some approximations in order to come to the models that I'm going to present very soon. So there is a need for some clarifications. What the, let's say, experts have done They have created a spreadsheet model to estimate the cost of annual generation and supply over, let's say, 8,760 hours. They have incorporated previous analysis and parameters of Kosovo power sector. The data were actually taken from the latest levelized cost of energy projections from one of the most esteemed research institutes, Fraunhofer, and also investment and capital costs were included in this calculation, as the LCOE comprises total capital cost, fixed and variable operation and maintenance, fuel price, and construction time. So practically that would be the formula that brought to the scenarios that I would present in the minutes to come. And this is the base scenario, that is with the introduction of the Kosovo area power plant. And back in 2014, the idea was to bring this power plant into the scene starting in the beginning of 2018. So practically we would have to shut down Kosovo A, which is the oldest power plant, by the end of 2017. With this scenario, it was calculated that actually Kosovo B would extend its lifespan even beyond 40 years and even beyond 2024. And the idea was to consider for some improvement in transmission and distribution in terms of efficiency. Either way, this would be the scenario where we would continue to rely almost exclusively on coal for the future. The second model was, the second result and what they have come with was the case of considering solar prices reducing as per the, let's say, agenda of the US government to the level of sunshot as they are known, whereby 1 watt would amount to $1. And with that being said, we would have the case where actually the Kosovo A power plant would shut down by the end of 2017 as expected by the energy community and required at least until a month ago. And we see that there are some changes in that regard. Also, the Kosovo B would be shut down by the end of its lifespan, so by the end of 2024. And that would be the scenario with the highest amount of solar PV participation with a capacity of approximately 325 megawatts. But that would, of course, require for some insertion of the major hydro projects and the small-scale ones in order to offset for all the intermittence of renewables into the grid. The third outcome was the aggressive energy efficiency measures, and as per the expectation based on the energy community, Kosovo has actually promised to reach a level of 25% target by 2020. But we have also been a little bit optimistic and said we will even go beyond that, so we will reach a target of 29.45%. However, if we look at the numbers right now, you can see that we are really lagging behind in that regard. However, this scenario would actually once more consider that there would be a close down of Kosovo A by the end of its lifespan. Actually, Kosovo B would continue with this life even beyond what is expected. But the idea is to cut down by half the losses in the transmission and distribution, and also as well to try to improve the energy performance of the public buildings. Now, the fourth scenario was the introduction of natural gas with aggressive EE measures. Currently, Kosovo has no local, let's say, gas resources, and the only way how we could integrate gas into our energy mix would be by being part of the transatlantic pipeline, and that would only be possible after 2019. Now, the government has had some discussions about it, but they remain rather vague. So talking about gas is something that has currently remained at the level of the B scenario, because why should we talk about other alternatives when we are practically sleeping on coal? And yes, remember, we are the 5th largest reserve of lignite in the world and the 3rd in Europe, so it's nonsense to consider some other options. But the introduction of natural gas would, of course, be combined with introduction of solar PV and higher intensities, and it would also require some imports in order to meet the local demand. And this is one of the most, I would say, scenarios where they try to see what would be the case for applying storage penalty for solar. That would be in order to offset for externalities when inducing a lot of power into the grid and in order to balance and meet all the flexibility criteria. So I wouldn't really like to go into further details into this case, but that has been the final case, and that is the carbon shadow price. That would be the moment when we would actually talk in similar terms with the World Bank. And why I'm bringing up the World Bank is because World Bank is actually the institution that is currently pledging to back up the building of the new power plant. And we were like, okay, so you want to do this, but we were going to tell you that actually there are some things that you were talking about, and that is applying carbon shadow prices in future coal projects. And this was the idea, to just tell them that actually, maybe if we talk in similar terms, you should reconsider what are you doing, and is it actually right to continue supporting coal-based projects in the future, especially after your pledge in 2013, when actually the World Bank has gone publicly saying that as of now, we will not be supporting coal projects, except for the cases when there are no other financial possibilities. And this was the idea why we actually engaged in this study, to showcase that actually there are other financially feasible alternatives, because the base coal scenario is the most expensive one and the most costly one. And as you can see, is the first one in the row, so it would be approximately, based on the estimations, $2.17 billion US, while all the other scenarios are significantly lower than the base one. Now you would say, well, actually there's not so significant difference, but we're talking about a very poor region, and even these small numbers do actually matter. So this was a study that was brought to the policymakers in 2000, as I said, end of 2014. But what happens now? I have inserted this as a food for thought. This was actually presented to the policymakers, as I said, to demonstrate that this is not the only option, and that if we continue our coal reliance, that we're actually not going to be as competitive as the rest of the region and the world, and that there is a diversity of low carbon pathways. But only 2 days ago, we have been participating in the meeting of the Committee for Economic Development within the Assembly of Kosovo, where the Minister of Economic Development was reporting. And despite all the fuss, even though I would really marginalize if I said fuss, but despite all the lobbying, advocacy, and the work we have done, it seems that the World Bank will indeed support the new Kosovo power plant. And it's a matter of days, as per the words of the minister, before they finalize the agreement. So what remains for us is actually, yes, we're not giving up yet, and we're especially going to address the fact that we yet don't have the environmental impact assessment study. So I guess it might buy us some time before we have the final outcome of this project. But I guess we will remain at the case of simply asking for a little bit more accountability in meeting the energy efficiency targets and the renewable targets. And how do we actually do it? We have a very interesting structure. We consist of think tanks, media, and grassroots organizations. So we have the people who do the research, just like the one I presented. We have the people who are in the field and talk to the constituencies and want to hear their problems, especially the ones who are situated around the mines and around the power plants. And we have the media organizations who everything that we do disseminate to the public. Now you would say, why you need media? Well, normally the public media are siding with the government. So if you talk to them, it's like lost case. But then you need some other credible media, and we actually have the Balkan Network of Investigative Journalists, which is siding with us, and it's actually working at the level of increasing awareness about the potential outcome of future reliance on coal. So yes, you might think that we have lost the case on one side, but on the other side, this would rather push us to work even more to ask for high accountability and, of course, for meeting the targets that we have set to ourselves as part of the Energy Community Treaty. Now, normally I would open the floor for questions and answers, but since I don't have the people who have worked on this study with me, I might miss the chance of giving you specific answers to some technicalities, but I would really, really appreciate your suggestions and comments on what you suggest we should do for the future. Thank you.